The church. A place of faith, of worship, of community. Yes, our church is a place that we should all be thankful for. And we have one man to thank for this modern church, Martin Luther. Why, he's so important to the Reformation, Lutherans are actually named after him. Not bad, Martin. It was Luther who, inspired by God, boldly nailed his 95 Theses to the doors of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, a document that unapologetically challenged established doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church. Luther was the first to stand up to the church. Except, of course, for Girolamo Savonarola, who 20 years earlier was burned at the stake for standing up to the church. Or John Huss, who 100 years prior was burned at the stake for standing up to the church. Or John Wycliffe, who 130 years prior died of natural causes, and was then dug up and burned at the stake for standing up to the church. But the threat of being burned alive didn't stop Martin Luther from speaking out for what was right. Did it, Martin? Why, it was Martin Luther who believed all people should be able to read the Bible. So he translated the entire Bible into German, all by himself. Oh, that's just Philip Melanchthon, who translated a few books of the Bible and was responsible for several other important Reformer writings. Also edited Luther's work at times, a little. Philip did organize Martin's writings into easier-to-study works, and those works were then preserved and used to teach generations of Christians. But other than that, Luther reformed the church all by himself, without anyone. And here's John Calvin, who created a new structure for organizing the church and also wrote extensively about reforming the church. But really, where would any of these folks be without Martin Luther? And we cannot forget that during all of Martin Luther's reforming, he was in constant danger. The Pope had kicked Luther out of the church, and he'd been declared an outlaw. However, Luther's faith in God and bravery allowed him to face even these threats. Yes, sir, Martin Luther certainly showed them. Of course, it did help that Luther was protected by Prince Frederick the Wise and a few other princes. But let's not get bogged down in the details. What is truly important is that we remember that it was Martin Luther the Visionary who answered God's call to reform the church. With some assistance.
Lena can read, understands the text, and can form her own opinion. To her, this is nothing special, but 500 years ago, that was not the case for many people. Back then, Germany and other parts of Europe were divided up quite differently, both politically and geographically. They were ruled by emperors, kings, princes, and the Roman Catholic Church. There was not yet a Protestant church at the time. These mainly told the people what to believe in and how they should live. The church had something, well, how should we put it, to offer sinful people. For example, they sold letters of indulgence. These were supposed to exonerate someone from sin and reduce or even completely avoid the time spent in purgatory, that is, the period before entering heaven, money in place of repentance. And indeed, they could be bought for deceased relatives too. The church used the money to finance the construction of St. Peter's Basilica, for example, and to plug up financial gaps. Not everyone agreed with this. A German theologian by the name of Martin Luther criticized this misuse of indulgence. According to traditions, he was said to have published 95 theses on that issue on October 31st, 1517. He listed reasons that things should be about belief alone, about repentance, and God's grace, and not about making money and the church as an institution. How his theses were acknowledged is not known exactly today, but one thing is clear: Luther wrote history, and he heralded a Reformation. Thanks to the newly developed book printing technology, Luther's writings spread quickly and he gained followers, which the church did not exactly like that much. It was a turbulent time for Luther. He was excluded, accused, and pursued. Away from the public eye, at the Wartburg Castle in the German town of Eisenach, he continued to write using the alias Knight George. It was there that he also translated the New Testament from Greek, Hebrew, and sometimes Latin into German. This is how he made it possible for many people to read the Bible and to think for themselves. Education and freedom were the most important topics of the Reformation. However, it was not only a religious matter. In his writings about the Reformation, Luther also addressed those who were dissatisfied with the political and social order, such as farmers who suffered due to taxes and serfdom. They now demanded justice from those who ruled over them. The institution of the Catholic Church was shaken by this, and a new Protestant church was founded, even if this had not been Luther's intention at all. Over the course of decades, the prevailing common order of church and state gradually dissolved. The selling of indulgences has been prohibited in the Catholic Church since 1562 as well. Lena now knows why October 31st is marked in her calendar as Reformation Day. Protestants commemorate the publication of Martin Luther's theses on this day, along with the start of a Reformation, which stands for freedom, justice, education, and social equality.
At the start of the 16th century, the Roman Catholic Church was the predominant church all across Western Europe and had been so for hundreds of years. That is, until Martin Luther and friends helped bring about the Reformation, which led to a multitude of religious choice. Yes, the Reformation was undoubtedly a good thing. But what exactly is the Reformation? The Reformation took place in the latter years of a time known as the Renaissance, when a friar named Martin Luther challenged the authority of the Pope and proposed alternatives to the teaching of the Roman Catholic Church, primarily by proposing that salvation isn't won through good deeds, but given freely by God as a gift of grace. While Luther didn't intend to start a separate church of his own, it was perhaps an inevitable consequence of his teaching. Martin's courage helped fuel the Reformation movement and brought about a variety of changes. For instance, the Bible and church services were no longer in Latin, but in a language that people actually understood. Saints were no longer prayed to, but rather were viewed as models of faith and good Christian behavior. And priests were allowed to get married. Most significantly, the Pope's authority as the last and only word on scriptural interpretation was rejected. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church didn't agree with these changes, so several new churches had to be formed. And one reason for such a variety of new churches was that they didn't completely agree with each other, which is to be expected. And at times, churches don't agree with themselves, so they split up and form separate churches, which is completely appropriate. Indeed, the Reformation opened the door for a number of different denominations, and in fact, there are roughly 41,000 different Christian denominations today, and that number continues to grow.